Sair da escola já com uma formação profissional no currículo? Parece bom demais pra ser verdade, né? Pois é. No ensino técnico do Senac, isso é possível. É ensino médio junto com formação técnica, que acontece durante os 3 anos. Lá, eles usam metodologia para projetos, desenvolvendo competências como resolução de problemas, pensamento crítico e colaboração, além de valores éticos e sustentáveis. Quer saber? Senac. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino médio e saiba mais.
Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a literary podcast where we have been deep diving into your favorite novels.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy.
This summer, we are talking to some of our and TikTok's favorite authors. In our Summer of Love series, we'll be chatting with best-selling authors about their books, characters, and more. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised. Ana Huang is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and #1 Amazon bestselling author. Best known for her Twisted series, she writes new adult and contemporary romance with delicious alpha heroes, strong heroines, and plenty of steam, angst, and swoon sprinkled in. Her books have been sold to over 24 foreign publishers for translation and featured in outlets such as NPR, Cosmopolitan, Financial Times, and Glamour UK. A self-professed travel enthusiast, she loves incorporating beautiful destinations into her stories and will never say no to a good chai latte. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so happy you're here. I'm so happy you also like chai lattes. It just,
yes.
It validates me somehow.
They're so good if they're made right,
If they're made right. It's very important. And also just reading all of your #1s, like, holy crap. It's seeing it listed out, but then saying it out loud. I'm like, oh my God, it's well worth it. You're incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. It's still kind of like surreal, So, sometimes when you look at something, you're like, oh, okay, you read it, but sometimes it takes a while for it to sink in. I was like, oh, it's like on the New York Times.
Yeah.
It feels weird.
I can only imagine, but it's also, I don't know, validating where it's like, yes, I am amazing. I like, like, I thought the story was good, but other people agree because aggressively agree.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm putting words in your mouth, but this is like my words that I'm putting in of like, you're aggressively good. I will always forever remember the first time reading Twisted Games and just the changing the way I think about things. But before we get into all of the questions that I'm genuinely dying to ask you, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? How did you get into writing? Did you always know that you wanted to be a romance author?
Yeah, so I have been writing since I was very young. It started as a way to improve my English. I grew up in a Chinese immigrant household, and so my family only spoke Chinese at home. I went into school and I had to take English as a second language classes, and my mom, to speed that process along, she was like, just write me a short story in English every day. And so I did, and I became fluent in like 3 months.
Yeah.
I think part of it was also, I was around English a lot, but that really sparked my love for kind of reading and writing. And my family really encouraged it because they took me to the library all the time. They would always buy me books. So for the longest time, it was kind of a creative and therapeutic outlet for me. And I think there was a point when I was a child and I went to my mom and I was like, oh, I think I want to be an author when I grow up. I think I was like 8 or 9. And my mom was like, she's like, she's like, I love this as a hobby, but you need something more financially stable, right? And so I just continued doing it on the side for fun. And I actually studied international relations in college. And for the longest time, so after I graduated college, I actually didn't write or read for a long time just because life got so busy. I went to grad school, so I had to read a lot of like nonfiction books
Yeah.
for
What
grad
did you
school.
master in for your grad?
International politics.
So cool.
Yeah. I was like reading books on like, the theories of international relations and not spicy romance. So I kind of didn't do that for a while. And then 2020 came around and, I suddenly had a lot more free time on my hands. And I was getting a little burned out on my day job. And so I started reading and writing again. And I wrote Twisted Love at the end of 2020. I had written another series before that, but I wrote Twisted Love at the end of 2020. I published it in April 2021. And yeah.
Wait, hold up. I'm not doing the math isn't mathing for me. That's
sorry. It's a very condensed timeline that I just like spit out.
Yes, but the timeline is still 2020 and it is only 2023. I think
Yeah.
I can officially say prolific. I think that's a
Yeah.
prolific writer. Holy moly, that is incredible.
Yeah, the funny part is, I know everyone's like, someone commented on one of my TikToks, I think a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, how do you write so much? And I was like, it's because I have no work-life balance, that's why. Which is true also, it's very true. But it's funny because people are like, oh my God, you published so many books because I think, so how many books? 4 books, my first series, 4 books Twisted. I have 2 books in Kings of Sin out. So I have 10 books out and my 11th one is coming out in October. And I know a lot of people look at it and they're like, wow, since 2020, that's a lot of books, right? And it is technically, but in the indie world, I'm actually a pretty slow publisher because I generally publish like 2 to 3 books a year. And there are some people in the indie world that will publish like 4 or 5, like 6 books a year. Like some of them publish every month, which I'm like, I can't do that.
No, impossible. That's impressive. But I also love that your family encouraged you and it was almost like it was training in many ways because then you had to write a story a day, which kind of instills this, because writing work ethic is so different than day job work ethic, because day job work ethic, you have bosses telling you like you have 9 to 5, you need to do all these emails, but like writing and having to push yourself is so impressive.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it was so much fun for me. Like, it did not feel like I didn't go home because, like, in high school, right, I worked at a job at a restaurant. So, and I worked really long hours. Like, over the summer, I would work from, like, I think 10 a.m. in the morning to, like, 10 or 11 p.m. at night. So I worked, like, 12-hour days during my summers in college. And I would come home, I would eat my dinner, and then I would, like, sit down and I would, like, write. And for me, that was, like, a way of de-stressing, right? So it was a lot of fun.
And, when the story just comes, it just comes out.
Yeah, it did. And there's something so freeing. For any like first time aspiring writers out there, honestly, like enjoy the experience of writing for yourself of that first book because there's not as much pressure, right? You're literally just writing because you enjoy doing it. And that's not to say I don't enjoy writing now, but it's a little bit different when it's your like livelihood and you have like an audience and you have expectations and you have all of those things. So just enjoy kind of that freedom to write as you will.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's I did my bachelor's in creative writing, and so everyone there was a writer, and it was so this level of like what you thought you had to achieve versus following your passion and just talking to, I think we're in like a golden era personally in my opinion of books, because like I feel like women are just embracing what they want to read. And I think part of the reason why they want to embrace what they want to read is because of these amazing female heroines. Like it's just they're all so unique, but I find your female heroines to be particularly unique, especially within the romance genre. And I'm going to use Vivian as an example for this because you got a lot of heroines, but
I do.
But she's so strong and vulnerable and has a pretty good understanding of herself, and that means her character growth has to come from other places of her story, which feels more poignant to me in many ways. How do you find that balance between strong female character and yet character growth?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because for me, when I write, like I know because one of my pet peeves when I read is I kind of don't like heroines who let people walk all over them.
Yep.
And I understand that it's a good starting point for character growth, obviously, but for me, it's kind of like there has to be a little bit of a balance. And I think for my characters, it's like there's different facets of their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can be really strong and confident in one area of your life, which like for Vivian, she was. Like when it came to her job, when it came to her relationship with Dante, like she didn't really have a problem standing up for herself
Mm-hmm.
or being strong. But when it came to her family, she was a much different person, right? So a lot of her personal growth came from that aspect of her life. And I think that is in many ways resonant with a lot of people because especially people that kind of come from a culture where it is expected that you treat your elders in a certain way and you defer to them in a certain way. And even for me, like the way that I am with my friends and the way
Mm-hmm.
that I am at home is like completely different,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like you switch, like not like personalities, but almost like personalities in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about, sometimes character growth is just like one about them discovering something about themselves. Like it's not necessarily that their entire life has to be changed, but it's like one aspect that they needed to work on, or like an emotional wound
Mm-hmm.
that they have to heal, which ties also into the romantic relationship
Yeah.
aspects of it as well. Because when I write books, I try to look at three different arcs. I look at the hero's arc, I look at the heroine's arc, and I look at the relationship arc.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of that has to change from the beginning to the end. There has to be like some growth in all three of those paths. And that's kind of how I look at it.
No, that makes so much sense. And I think it also gives the reader an understanding that women can be more than just one thing. Like you can have your shit together and you can be super successful, but then, there's going to be that thing that might hold us back, our insecurities, or things that or, so many other facets about it. And something that you said where wanting them to grow and then the fact that that impacts the relationship rather than here's the relationship, I'm striving to make my relationship better or work. It's like, no, there's a core thing about the women who they work on themselves and then it
Yeah.
impacts the relationships in general around them.
Yeah. And that's so true because I feel like in order to have a healthy relationship with someone else, you have to have a healthy relationship with yourself
Yeah.
first. And it's all about like because relationship is so much about communication and boundaries and setting expectations. So I feel like unless you have a strong sense of that for yourself, like knowing where to draw the boundaries, like knowing how to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
knowing when to give and take, like you can't have a truly good relationship unless you're comfortable with all of
Yeah.
those things.
And I'll even throw in Isabella for that, where you can see her relationship with her brother get
Yeah.
impacted later in that,
Yeah.
like, in the epilogue. But at the same time, you're like, you can see how she worked on herself and then it was impacting other parts in her life in a healthy way,
Yeah.
happy, healthy way.
Yeah. 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 It's not just about romantic relationships.
You're very good at like having fulfilled, it's not part of my questions, but I'm gonna throw this in there. You're very good at having multiple fulfilling relationships, especially like when it comes to female relationships, because you don't always see that. A lot of times
Mhm.
you don't really see like female friends with one another, but you always, I mean,
Yeah.
that's also kind of like the core of some, like the Twisted series, like that was the core of like, here are
Yeah.
these like group of women who love each other and stuff and I'll have their own
Yeah.
journey. But I find like, I always notice that I always clock when a female heroine doesn't have female friends.
Yeah, it's a little, and that's one of the things that kind of bothers me too. When I went into the Twisted series, I was very cognizant. I was like, I want this series to have female friendships. I want them to be strong female friendships because I feel like, and I kind of, and I understand because when I grew up in that era, there were a lot of books where it was a lot of like it's always about the other
Mm-hmm.
women, like any girls that were in the book that were not the heroine, right? They were like catty or they were
Yeah.
jealous or all of these things. And it was just kind of, that was normal in some of the books when I was growing up. So for a long time, it was normalized in my mind because I was like, oh, like this is what it's supposed to be. But the older I grew up, the more I was like, like this is not true. And I wanted more, like I wanted more media where you show healthy female friendships because I think they're so important.
Yes.
And I just love, honestly, seeing girls thrive. So.
Truth. It's like we are magical, wonderful creatures. And it's just like very much, I embrace, I don't know, I love, our audience is like 98% female. And I'm like, yes, we're doing something right. That's
love it. I know. So like whenever I go into my analytics and I start to see the male percentage tick up and I'm like, what's going on? Like, no, like not that I don't love, like I do have male readers and I think they're great.
Like, this is,
but I'm like,
it's like, are you one of those TikTok guys that are just trying to get some clout on here? Because that is an intake of those where it's like all of a sudden,
or like the wrong steamy quote goes viral on like the wrong section, and then suddenly you get an influx of like,
you're like, that's not what that was about.
Non-bookish men being like, do you need a research partner for the spicy scenes? No, an actual DM that I got one time on Instagram, because the Instagram Reels algorithm was not really algorithming in the beginning.
Oh my God.
And I was like, well, this is gross and I'm gonna block you.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine. I didn't even think about the DMs that you must get from men.
Yeah, it's not as bad now because I think the algorithm kind of figured out. But in the beginning, when I first started posting to Reels and their algorithm was not really fine-tuned, it would just go into like the weirdest corners of Instagram.
And I say this from a place of like, I respect you as a woman and as an author, but like you're also super pretty. And so I'm sure it's like that doesn't, like I'm sure that also doesn't help where it's like, dirty books, pretty author, and then like the DMs must be.
My DMs are a wild place.
All right, I'm going to transition back into my questions in a natural way. As much as you absolutely do a great job with all of your heroines, it's the male characters, I have such a soft spot for them. And one of the things I love about the books is like you make those male characters work for their growth. They reflect on their actions, realize what they did wrong, and their apologies are top tier. It is something that you keep in mind when you're developing these male leads from the start, or do they almost surprise you in the process of like, oh, this is how you're going to apologize?
Yeah. I would say the details of it are generally kind of as I go. But like I said, I do a lot of character work before I start writing the books. So in my mind, I'm already like, okay, like how is this guy going to grow from being this kind of like very asshole? Can I curse?
Yeah, no.
This kind of like, this sort of like, very like alpha asshole used to getting what he wants to someone better, right? And it's kind of, I have to walk a line because there has to be growth, but I also don't want them to change completely, right? Because I think that's unrealistic. I'm like, listen, once an asshole, always kind of an asshole. Like Alex, take for example, Alex in Twisted Love, right? He will always be, he'll never be like a warm, super fuzzy person unless maybe with Ava and his kids. But it's like you have to show him softening without turning him into a different person. And so for me, it's something that I have to be very cognizant of. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh, like he's actually a little too soft and I have to like pull it back a little because I'm like, this doesn't feel like him. And then other times I'm like, okay, he's not soft enough and I have to like push into this a little bit. So it's something that's always in the back of my mind as I'm writing these scenes and trying to show the growth in a way that is not too fast, but also like believable.
Yeah, it's like a balance. And I love that means like there's thought behind the characters. Like I always find appreciation when I learn more about the process of developing a character where, you're really conscious of this and you want to make sure that it's true to who they are. And then it almost is like you're doing a progression of apologies between Alex, Dante, and then Dominic. Dominic.
Dominic.
It's one of those moments you realize I've never said the names out loud.
It's okay.
I've only read them, but like the progression of groveling is amazing.
I do love groveling. It's one of my favorite tropes, if you can't tell.
I love it because I feel like so many times guys are let off too easily. And
That's how I feel.
yeah,
I'm like, no, make him work more.
yeah, I'm like when I'm reading this, I'm like, no, I don't think I would approve of it just yet. Like it was,
Yeah.
I want that pain. Like I want you to suffer.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree. But and then for me, it's also like it has to make sense for the relationship also,
Yes.
in terms of the groveling. And okay, so a little tangent because one of the questions I get asked the most is in Twisted Hate, right? People are like, why does Josh not grovel more
Mhm.
after what he did,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, I love some good groveling, but it made sense for Alex and Ava. It did not make sense for Josh and
Yeah.
Jules for several reasons. First, they were both in the wrong. So it wasn't just him. And second, it was their relationship and the source of their conflict. Like groveling would not have really solved their problems, right? Like
Mhm.
for Jules, it was more like he needs to show like in action in this relationship. Like he can say, I'm sorry, he can do whatever.
Yep.
But for her, for her, it's part of like letting go of past wrongs and also moving on and letting him apologize through the way that he acts in the future. So an extended groveling does not really make much sense. Whereas in Alex and Ava, it made sense because he had played this like long game, right?
Mhm.
And she needed that time to make sure that he was not just saying like words.
Yeah.
Like he had to show his commitment over an extended period of time. So it's like two very different things,
Mhm. No, I mean it makes sense. Like, it's almost like the punishment has to match the crime in many ways.
Yeah.
And, in the same way with Vivian and Dante, where like his goal was to show we can work. Like this is how we can redate and stuff. So it's, but it just reflects on that those male characters have done some digging on
Yeah.
their own mistakes and saying like, okay, how can I
Yeah.
make amends to this specific action?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot for some of these characters to say, I'm sorry. They're not used to it.
No, and that's what makes it so good.
Yeah. I love that. I'm like humbled a little.
Oh yeah, humbled a little, humbled a lot. It's like those moments are just,
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, this is perfect.
I know.
And then you have
Yes.
like, characters like Kai and Isabella where they're just, it's just like a perfect moment of togetherness.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a huge, like it just
Yeah.
was, it was just like a quiet moment on a bridge.
Yes. And I always say, I'm like, King of Pride was probably the most wholesome book I'll ever write.
Really
That's like,
sweet.
I was like, this is as wholesome as I can get, guys. I can't get, like, don't ask me to write anything sweeter than this book.
Good to know. I'll prepare
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, sometimes it's, like it doesn't always have to be a big grovel. Sometimes it can just be a quiet moment of like reflection and, all of these things. So
it's so sweet. It's so sweet.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
You kind of touched on it of how like that book is so different. Like, the most it was so cute. It was just so cute. I had a lot of warm fuzzy feelings. But what's mind-blowing to me when I read your series is how different all the books are, and the mood, the characters, the type of books that vary within this series. Like, I don't know what to expect, but in the best way possible. Do you have it mapped out when you're plotting these books? Do you know that you're going to go from brother's best friend, kind of murdery, to bodyguard princess, crawl to me? Like, because those are two different things. Or from
Two different
arranged
things.
marriage to opposites attract. Like, you go
Yeah.
all over.
I wrote all over. I was just like, let me just skip over to this one. I don't super map out my books until I write them. So I have a general idea of like what tropes and the general dynamic and setup of the future books. Like when I wrote Twisted Love and Reese and Bridget showed up, I was like, okay, the next one is going to be some type of forbidden romance, princess bodyguard. Obviously, that's going to be the conflict, right? Like she can't be with him because of her station. I didn't know the details until I started plotting out that book. And same with Josh and Jules. Like from the start, I was like, they're going to be enemies to lovers. Did not know how that was gonna play out until it was time to sit down and plot that out. Because I tried not to map out too far in advance, because for me, I do some plotting ahead of time, but a lot of the time the story will change as I write it and I get to know the characters better. So I don't want to spend so much time creating an outline for all of these books when I just know like it's gonna change.
Yeah, no, that's fair. As you start writing, you're like, well, okay, turns out you're now enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers again. Or
Yeah, and honestly, I know some people, they are like, well, I don't understand, like, you're the author, why can't you just make the characters? And they're like, no.
It's a journey.
No.
It's like sometimes you write and you're surprised and you're like, oh my god, do you know what just happened?
I know. I'm shocked. I'm like, what happened?
I do that all the time when I'm writing and I'm like with my roommates or something. I'll put my laptop down. I'm like, oh my god, let me just tell you what just happened. And it's
I know.
But that's what's in your mind. But I'm sure that also makes your writing so freeing, because you're not locked in a lane. Like, yes, you're a romance author, but there's so many types and variables to this that like you aren't like this specific trope. You aren't this. Like, I can so see you going, if you wanted to do a sports romance, like I can see it trailing off at any point and just doing what makes you happy and what makes the characters make sense.
Yeah. And I think that is true. I try to like create a little bit of wiggle room in like my books. And I mean, there are certain things that people expect from me, right? They expect like sexy scenes. They expect a somewhat like more alpha hero, a lot of like kind of luxury travel. I was talking to my friends the other day, who's also my content editor, and I was like, we're talking about branding, and I was like, what do you think my brand is? And she's like, probably luxury, sex, and murder. And I was like, you're not completely wrong.
If you're gonna pick three things, like, I think those are three good ones. Those are
I was like, I'll take it, honestly. But yeah, so it's like, every book, I try to deliver on what people come to me for, but also to kind of do things like a little bit differently, so I'm not stuck just writing like one thing. I do love alpha heroes.
Oh god, I love an alpha hero. I'm like, every single time, I swear, like, and sorry guys if this is a spoiler for King of Wrath, but like, but it's like when the second that Vivian was at the store buying the jewelry and then the people came in, I just was like, yes, fuck yes. Like, knowing what Dante's reaction was going to be, like, it was like a moment of like, yes, this moment is here. I'm really excited. Give me a who did this to you, and I will never be angry about that.
Yeah, one of my favorites. It's always like, you're like, Vivian, I'm so sorry you're getting held at gunpoint, but also like, it's great.
I was like, does she want to be? Do you want to shoot her? Like, that's fine.
She was in the hospital. Oh my god.
I mean, like, just I'm all for like, take it to the umpteenth degree, like, but then his reactions are reasonable because he beat him up. But if she was hurt, then he would murder, and then she'd have issues with it. So
Yeah, I know. I'm always like, oh, some of these girls, maybe they wouldn't like it if their guys were too murdery. I'm like, Ava and Stella, I'm like, just kind of stay in your sunny.
I'm convinced that this is like transforming an army of women that are okay with murder a little
Yeah.
more. And I've always said that like the only reason why like women don't fully rule the world is because we're not as okay with murder as men are. But
Yeah,
like
it's true.
romance is
Yeah.
changing that for me.
I know. They're like, it's okay because they kill for her.
Exactly. So like it's cool.
Yeah. Oh God.
It's my morals are becoming very questionable. The amount of
It's
times I've
okay.
like embarrassingly Googled modern mafia families. Like I'm just
Oh
I
my
didn't. I did.
God.
There are
They're
none.
not as cute. They're not as attractive as the
You
ones in
know,
books.
it's amazing how much billionaire men don't
Oh my
have.
God.
Like you have everything at your
Yeah.
disposal. I expect like 6'4", like 6-pack.
No,
You can
no.
get
It's like, have you seen, oh my God, I saw like this video edit this other day on TikTok where it was like billionaires in real life, and then it was photos of,
depression.
real life
Yeah.
billionaires. And then it was like billionaires in books, and it's like all these like hot Pinterest models and like suits.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah.
You know what? I don't even need $1 billion. Give me $100,000 and I'll be so much hotter.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah, it's so true. I'm like, get a facial, get your hair done.
Right?
I'm like, I can go buy some new clothes.
Give me like the magic I can do with $100. Like
Yeah,
get some
yeah.
like lashes on me. Boom. It's
I mean, this is completely going on a tangent, but
love
like
them.
the difference that lashes and eyebrows can make on a face is truly incredible.
It is amazing. I will like every single time that I get my makeup professionally done, I always tell them like make me a catfish. Like cuz I can't do this. Like I can't make my eyebrows and lashes do what you're doing. So like I don't want to recognize myself. And
I don't want to look in the mirror and know who's staring back at me.
Exactly. I want to walk by and be like, "Oh my God, who's she? Oh, wait, that's me.
That's me.
That's that badass." Yeah. So, after reading the Twisted series, when I read King of Wrath, I could not stop guessing who the next book is about, and it's now become my own personal fun game. Like I can't read anything unless I'm like, who's that? So
are you getting a book?
Who are you about? What's your story? How do you decide whose story's next? Because I mean, even after King of Pride, I feel like I'm so close of having like a murdered board where it's like all the characters in string where I'm like, okay, so whose story's next?
Yeah. It's sometimes I have it already planned out ahead of time when I plan a series. I'm like, okay, this seems like a natural progression from this couple to this couple in terms of, for instance, like how much the main characters interact with, like Dante and Kai are friends, right? And Isabella and Vivian are best friends. So it makes sense for them to be the next couple just because there was already so much interaction with them. But then sometimes, honestly, they take me a little by surprise. Like Dante, like he first made an appearance in Twisted Hate and he just popped up. Like I had it planned for him and then he just showed up and I was like, like hot Italian billionaire.
Oh, I had to like go back and scroll. I was like, no, that Dante?
Yeah. So sometimes they pop up. Sometimes it's a little bit planned. So depends.
It just depends. It just goes. You keep me guessing. You keep all of us guessing. I'm just like,
I love seeing the couple theories.
I know. Like the second where I was like, okay, Gabriel, the oldest brother. I'm like, it's going to be his story, and then all of a sudden you introduce like Felix, right, and Clarissa, and then it's just like, gosh damn it, like what's? Because then
it could be any. There's some red herrings in there.
Because then I'm like pointing at you as if I'm mad, but I'm not mad. I embrace you, but I'm like, but then you mess with the timeline because you're not afraid to go back in time to catch up with the story.
Yeah, it's not always linear. And I will say, sometimes I really shoot myself in the foot in doing that because overlapping timelines were so hard to write. I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
I was like, when I was writing Twisted Lies, I was like, oh God. This timeline is
You're like, wait, okay, so they're mad here. Did I say? I guess you don't have to be mad, guys. Sorry,
I literally, before each book, so now when I write the books, I put in actual dates and years for what happened. I'm like, okay, like they go to the wedding in like September 2025 or whatever, right? So I have to map that out. Otherwise, I get confused. Right. So I because sometimes I'm like, has it been 1 year? Has it been 3 years? I don't know.
I mean, I'm impressed because you do figure it out because it all lines up, because I'm definitely like, wait a minute, what just happened? And I go back and read
Yeah.
it, and it is impressive that you do the timelines, but it also terrifies me because that means nothing is safe and that you can go back and cover everything. And even though
Never know.
you never know, because I could see a couple over here. I'm like, oh, you guys are together? That's suspicious. That's
I
I don't know if
know.
I trust this.
What can I say? I like to keep people on their toes.
I mean, yeah, you're keeping me on my toes. And then like after King of Greed, you have 2 more after that, right? Plot it.
Well, Kings of Sin is 7
King
books.
of Sin is
so there's 7 sins. I know.
Oh my
There's
god,
4.
I didn't put that. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. You know, a lot of people didn't, and I was like, should I have made that more clear?
No, you got to book
but
3. Smart people with common sense would have figured that out.
No, it's 7 deadly sins. So there's 4 more books after Greed. And yeah, I really locked myself in. I can't even write fewer than 7 books if I.
Oh my god, Sloth is one of them, right? Now I'm curious.
Yes.
Oh, I'm curious how that all.
Yeah, some of them I was like, and I have to tell people, I'm like, King of Sloth, like the sin, not the animal. There are no actual. I mean, maybe they actually do get a pet sloth. I don't know.
And,
I haven't figured it out yet.
You're saying luxury trips. I'm seeing a luxury trip to the rainforest.
To the sloth
sanctuary. They propose.
We'll see Kristen Bell, if you know what I'm talking about.
I was thinking Kristen Bell too.
Every time I think of sloths, I think of her.
There has to be at least like one Kristen Bell reference in that book, just
I
casually,
know.
just like a little breadcrumb for everyone.
I'm gonna put that in.
Yes. And when you do, I'll be like, yes, I thought of that. Whenever, through all this like series of interviewing all these authors, I'm always like, gonna feel free to use that idea. That's
feel free to write about this character.
Feel free. Although the one thing I will always say, like, don't use Jacqueline as a romantic name. It's just not a good romance character.
It's a pretty name though.
I mean, if you say it correctly, Jacqueline, but like
Jacqueline, French.
And then so that's why I go by Jack, because it's just like, it's not. I don't know.
Do people call you Jackie?
I never go by Jackie. My mom wanted a tomboy. Jack. It didn't work out for her, but the name Jack stuck. But it is a great detection to see which guy friends, like back in the day, liked me, and they would go from Jack to Jacqueline.
Oh, that is a nice way to figure it out.
Yeah.
You're like, they start calling you by a different name and you're like,
it was such a thing where I'm like, wait a minute. Except now all my friends are gay, so I'm LA baby. That's
LA, yeah.
So I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying earlier and about Vivian's journey. And it's not just Vivian's journey, but I see this in a lot of your characters. And that's the struggle between balancing culture, traditions, and respecting your elders. And that hit me hard because I'm first generation on my mom's side Chilean. I'm half, hence the white. But it's the concept of taking care of your parents, respecting them.
Yeah.
I don't even say shut up in front of my mom. Like it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's my SH word. Like, I've never talked back a day in my life. And even to this day, like I do not curse in front of her at all. And it's like,
me neither.
No. And that's a huge thing, especially for outside of America. And I see that in a lot of cultures outside of America. And it's not something that we see discussed in mainstream popular books. And the fact that you're bringing it to the forefront and as a major theme to that is absolutely incredible. So how important is it for you that you discuss this in your books?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty important. And the thing is, for me, I always strive in my books to show a world that reflects the world we live in, right? Which is a world with a lot of diversity, with a lot of different types of characters and ethnicities and sexualities and all of those things, right? And for me, it's like I have a lot of Asian characters because I'm Asian, and that's the Chinese Americans to be specific, and that's the background that I know best. So obviously I write a lot more characters in that ethnicity. And for me, it's like you can't write about these characters without, unless they're completely estranged from their family, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't write about them without bringing at least some of these cultural tenets into the story. And for me, it's a balance because I also don't want the story, I don't want their entire personalities to be based on the fact that they're
Yeah.
Asian, you
Yeah.
know? Like, and so it's for me, it's like kind of introducing those little cultural aspects. So they are important to the way they view the world and the way that they approach relationships without making it like their entire story. Um, and sometimes, you know, I think it is a little difficult. I'll still continue writing them the way it does, but I think for people who are not used to that type of culture or like that type of, I guess, dynamic, they'll read the books and they'll be like, oh, like I just don't understand why she doesn't just tell her parents to like fuck off,
Yeah.
or like she has no backbone when it comes to their family. And I'm like,
You can't.
it's such a different way
Yeah.
of thinking, but like unless you grow up in that culture, it's a really hard thing to grasp. Right. So it's always very interesting to me to kind of see the reactions to some of these characters in these books based on the backgrounds of the reader and their own life experiences and how they approach these characters differently.
Yeah.
You know, but it is pretty important to me. So I'm like, yeah, if they have an Asian character and their family is a big part in their life, like I can't not touch on that in some way.
It makes sense. I mean, there's in Vivian's story, and at one point her friends were kind of pushing her on, well, why can't you? Why can't you? I actually got a little emotional because like she was, I mean, I've never seen it explained so perfectly in the sense of like, I can't. Like there was just like, I can't do this. Like there's no other words to explain.
Yeah.
Like this is just kind of what's expected. This is what's ingrained. But then at the same time, you bring in Isabella, who's Filipino, and that's like another form of respecting your elders, but in the form of your oldest brother. And then, but it's also a different, it doesn't have to look the same way of harsh parent that just, you know, will get rid of you and, you know, disown you and never speak to you.
Yeah. And, you know, that was something that I was actually very conscious of because I didn't want every Asian family to play into this thing of being like, you know, all Asian parents are like really hard on their kids and they're only one certain way. I mean, they are, a lot of them are that way, but there are also lots of really like loving families. There's a lot of different dynamics within the culture and within that group. So I wanted to make sure that I reflected a broader spectrum of experiences as opposed to just like one way. Right?
No, it makes sense. And, you know, I think like Alessandra is from Brazil, right? That's so I'm excited to see, you know, some of that in there too. And like
I love Brazil. I've been there twice.
Oh, nice.
And because one of my friends lives there, so I went there last year to visit her, and then she got married there this year, so I went back. I was just there like 2 months ago.
Wow. Have you been to Chile?
Yeah, I have not, but I really want to go. It's on my bucket list.
Yes, it's I'll be there with my family in February, so like if you want to coordinate, that's fine.
I should. What's the best time to visit Chile?
Like winter here, which is summer there.
Okay.
So like January,
Got
February, March are really good times. It's basically California, but in South America. Like it's just a skinnier version.
So
it is like, I mean, that's why my family moved from Chile to California. Like, you know, you got beach, you got mountains, you have snow, you have sun, and you got earthquakes.
Yeah. You know, like it's literally like California.
Like you guys didn't really get too creative in your move here with this whole like immigration thing. You guys kind of just went from like here to
That's so funny. I do need to visit. It's definitely on my bucket list.
So I originally discovered your books through TikTok, which makes sense because it all started coming out in 2020, 2021. I was worried I missed the train. Turns out I was on the train. And the TikTok community really, really embraces your books. What do you think about your books resonates with them so much?
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's an interesting question because it's always people always ask me, they're like, what about your books made them like viral on Book Talk? And I'm like, I wish I knew. I would like bottle it up and do that with every series, right? But I think it's a couple of different things, right? Some of it is the story itself. Some of it is honestly timing. For me, I think the readers on TikTok tend to be younger. So they tend to be in that like late teens, early 20s range, which the characters in my Twisted series
Yeah.
are. So I think for them, it's a lot more relatable because I find, it's interesting because I find that romance readers of that generation who are kind of like in that college age, they really love stories, like not just about the romance, but they really love the stories about friendship, about like family, and how that be a strong thread too. Because I think it really resonates with them. And so I think that aspect of the Twisted series really like tied it in for them. And I also think, I mean, one of the questions I get asked the most is the Twisted series dark romance, right? And this is one of the questions I get asked like the most. And for me, I think it's subjective. Like darkness is always subjective. I always say the series is like contemporary romance with darkish themes, right? So to someone that is used to reading very fluffy, like sweet rom-coms, it's going to seem dark, but to people who are used to reading super dark romance, it's like not dark at all. But I do think it is kind of like a bridge between the two. It's like for people who kind of want to dip their toes into like kind of darkish stuff. So I think a lot of readers also, when they want something a little more intense than what they have been reading, they're like, I don't want to say like graduating, but when they want to like shift a little bit more from like more classic contemporaries to something maybe a little darker, then they'll pick up the books. And then also, once it gets picked up by a group, I think the word of mouth just spreads. And yeah, people also just love like the morally gray billionaires. You can't go wrong with that. And yeah, the timing was really great. I think it came out in 2021. It was right at the very start of Romance Book Talk, I think, really coming up, because when I joined in late 2020, it was still very much YA fantasy, right? It was all like, it was like Sarah J. Maas, it was Cruel Prince, it was like From Blood and Ash, right? So romance book talk was not really a thing at that time. And then it really started to grow in 2021, and then it kind of exploded in 2022. So I think also part of it was just I was very lucky, and I happened to be one of the first series, I guess, that
did all that. But I mean, I'll kind of go back to what you were saying earlier, and I can really see this resonating with the Twisted series with that younger audience and the found family, because that is such a, yes, that's a theme that you see in fantasy and it's great, but you don't like, you're finally bringing that into a more realistic level of like, here are my best friends from college and you are now my family, and this is what that means to me. And then even with the King of Sin series, where they're a little older, late 20s, maybe even like early 30s. And I love to always say, like, when I'm reading something, like 25, your brain's not done developing until you're 25. And I can see that difference in your writing. And I think that as a reader, I can go back easily to like when I was like under 25 and be like, brain wasn't done yet, and you can see the mistakes that are made, versus being more secure in yourself, being able to have an understanding and saying like, okay, yes, this is what I want to do, or willing to go to therapy and other stuff. So it's I think those are all things that I can definitely see resonating with audiences.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot. I mean, so much of it, I think, is like emotion and relatability. I honestly, truly think that the difference between a book that someone enjoys and a book that they don't. I mean, yes, sometimes it's plot, sometimes it's character development and all of these things and prose. But a lot of the times it's whether it's relatable for them, right? Because when I talk to people at signings and I ask them, I'm like, oh, like, what is my favorite book of yours that I've written? Or a lot of them will be like, oh, like this and this is my favorite book because I just related so much to the characters. I felt seen, right? No one is like, I mean, I'm sure there's some of them, but no one was like, oh my God, like I love this like 3-act structure that you like put in this book.
The 3-act, I bookmark it at every point. And I'm like, act 2.
You're like, great timing on the first plot point. No, but yeah, so a lot of it I think is really relatable.
Yeah, it is. And like, it's just and there's something about TikTok that adds that, for out of all the social platforms, I find it to be the most human in many ways. Because you're getting people's responses, you're able to see their reactions, and it's lovely.
It is. I love seeing like reader reactions if they're good.
Yeah.
If they're not good, I don't need to see them. No,
I
I'm kidding.
understand that. I searching our reviews where I'm like, let's skip that one. That's so before we depart and have to say goodbye, but are there any upcoming projects? Obviously we're hinting towards King of Greed a little bit later, but is there anything else that you want our listeners to know and look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, King of Greed is coming out. After that, the fourth book is King of
Yep.
Sloth. It's coming out next year. But
King of Sloth is right after King of Greed.
King of Sloth is after Greed. Yes. You heard that here.
Yeah.
and then so I don't know how much I should say about this, but I am in my mind, I am brainstorming also another book that is not in the Kings of Sin series. And it's been one that's like kind of been on my mind for a while. I already have the book cover.
Oh.
Because I always get my book covers done before I write the book, because it's like a nice little, I'm like, oh, I have to write this book now because I already have this book cover for it.
Like, it's pretty, it'll be gorgeous. You have great
Yeah.
book covers too.
Oh, thank you. It's my designers. Yeah, they're great.
But you have the book cover in place, so we'll have
Yeah.
a book behind a book cover soon.
Yeah, hopefully. So more details on that soonish, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I'm so excited. Yeah, like I will say, I do see often your books having like the most aesthetic.
Oh, thank you.
We all appreciate the ones who do the aesthetics. We big fans of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if for whatever reason none of our listeners follow you, or anyone doesn't follow you, which is bullshit, go follow. Where can they find you on social?
I am author Ana Huang, ANAHUANG, across all of my social media. So I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok. And then I also have a Facebook reader group called Anna's Twisted Squad, where you can join in to kind of like talk to other readers, and they share like memes and edits and just like fun discussions.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Anna, so much for joining. And I can't wait to read everything and read about all the sloths in sloths. So
thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this mini episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com or via our Camflare voicemail system. Please visit booktalkforbooktalk.com for more information.
You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk. Bye! Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.